All right. Thank you, Rebalance. Thank you, Waleed. Thank you, Rob, Ian, and everyone. Thank you all for coming. My job is to build a case for a nature-based economy. So logistically, so what do I do? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So why do we need a nature-based economy? And how do we go about building it? So I have about 15 minutes to do so. All right. So where do we start this conversation? Where does this conversation start? It starts where we are right now as a society, as humanity. And everybody probably now knows that we are facing twin risks, not only the risk of climate change, but right next to us there's another risk, which is the risk of losing nature itself and its biodiversity. For the longest time, when I attended COP25, everybody was talking about climate change. Nature people were not there. Then I ended up in IUCN conference in Marseille, and everybody was talking about nature, but the climate people were not there. Then at COP26, it dawned on them that maybe the two are related. I'm happy to tell you that at COP27, they decided they are related. All right, so, but they're related, the two are related because of the human activity. We are the ones that are causing the climate risk, or playing a key role in it. And we're also the cause of the demise of nature and the loss of its biodiversity. So those that work on nature, let me start with the climate, they've defined that the way to solve the problem with the climate calamity is to reduce our emissions of all these poisonous gases, particular CO2, and at the same time offset. So it's not enough to cut off emissions. We need to drain the tub. We need to basically pull the carbon out of the atmosphere. Those that work on nature, they're trying to protect nature. We say we need to protect nature, we need to grow nature, we need to rejuvenate nature. The problem that we're facing is that if either of these two risks were to materialize, we're toast. So what's the use of having a carbon capture machine if you were to lose the ocean, for example? So it's not about capturing carbon. It's really about protecting nature and seeing whether nature can help us in the fight against climate change. So we have two risks. We cannot do them sequentially. We cannot handle them sequentially. We have to handle them at the same time because we are in the 11th hour. Question is, how are you going to do so? Well, it turns out that the answer is in the science, and that's the latest IPCC report. Says, well, if you were to protect nature, rejuvenate nature, allow nature to come back, then by definition you are reducing the risk to nature and the loss of its biodiversity. And what nature will do for you is, this is the latest IPCC report, it will help you to reduce climate change by at least 38%. Voila. There's a solution. You can leave now. Okay, question is, okay, so somebody we've identified how to fix at least 40% of it. Okay, question is, how are we going to do so? How are we going to protect nature? Because when we look at the funding, so nature is going to help us fight climate change. Let's see in what sense. Every time when I started this work 5 years ago, people, including me, thought it was all about trees. Turns out, no. The oceans, and this is the part of the ocean that is an orphan. This is the open ocean that belongs to nobody and therefore belongs to everybody. The scientists would tell you that this ocean has been grabbing carbon since we've kept data, 1870 till today. About 500 gigatons of carbon dioxide are sitting there. It's either suspended in water below 1,000 meters or at the bottom of the ocean. As long as we don't dredge it, as long as you don't mine it, that carbon is there, quite stable. That's the open ocean. What else? Closer to land, salt marshes, seagrass, mangroves, and other types of vegetation of this kind, they grab a lot of carbon dioxide and fix it in the roots or in the sediments. But they also do other things beyond carbon sequestration. They're great defense against flooding. And when you have healthy seagrass, you have healthy fish stocks, and you find that the coral reefs are actually quite healthy when you have healthy seagrass and mangroves and so forth. So it's not only trees, it's the oceans, it's flora. Here, and in the ocean, the biological life of the ocean starts with the phytoplankton, and these are the microscopic organisms that float in the ocean, and they do something wonderful. I'm sure you've heard this by now many times. They grab a lot of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. People say, how much? And I said, the science says it's at least 33 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year. And if you want to visualize it, that's the work of 4 Amazon forests per year. Okay? And what do they return? They return a lot of the oxygen that is in the atmosphere on a flow basis. Okay, what else? Well, just when you think it's all about flora, turns out the science tells us that no. The animals play a key role in this. This is a work starting with Andy Pershing's 2010 paper and so forth. They show that in this case the great whales grab carbon on their body, and when they die, because they're so heavy, they sink to the bottom of the ocean, and anything below 1,000 meters, that carbon is sequestered forever. And also through the way they feed, they like to eat a lot of krill, and because they eat a lot, they poop a lot, and their poop has in it phosphorus and nitrogen and, of course, iron. And iron in many places is the limiting factor. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because that's how they actually fertilize the phytoplankton. So the phytoplankton gets fertilized, runoff from rivers or movement of wind over land, but in the Southern Ocean, no rivers and no movement of wind over land, but there are whales. So the poop of the whale fertilizes the phyto becomes more active, grabs more carbon from the atmosphere. So it's not only about trees and the ocean itself or the flora, but it's fauna itself has a role to play. And notice here, it's not only just the whales are interacting with the krill, and the krill is interacting with the phyto, and the phyto is interacting with the whale, so it's really about biodiversity. It's a system. It's a living system. Okay? If you want to talk about land, this is work starting with Fabio Berzaghi's work of 2019 Nature Journal, and now he has a new paper in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, which shows that starting with the elephants, these are the forest elephants in the Congo Basin, through the way that they walk, they forage and fertilize, they add carbon in the forest between 7 and 14%. If you really want to dig down into this, the elephants, just like the hippos, just like the gorillas and others, they have taste buds, and they like to eat plants that are low in fiber, therefore high in protein. Low in fiber, that means low in carbon, and what they leave alone are plants that are high in fiber, therefore high in carbon. So just like us, we like to eat some foods, not other foods. When you leave them to themselves and they have food to eat, they choose plants that are low in fiber. And therefore, they're giving more space in terms of what they don't eat and in terms of the way they forage and walking around, by allowing the older growth to grow even bigger, therefore increasing carbon sequestration in the forest between 7 and 14%. So the message up to now is the science is telling us that it's not only flora, it's also fauna, and the two interact with each other, creating this beautiful web of life that we are benefiting from. All right. So since the whole idea then, my premise is we should protect nature, because nature then will help us fight climate change. Is there funding for nature? And the answer is there is some, but it's woefully short. Woefully short. And how short? Is by about $700 billion a year, by some estimates. So where's that funding coming from? The current funding for nature is coming really from philanthropy. So what this is telling you is, if you, for those of us that are already converts to the love nature, you're giving too little for what nature needs. The gap is about 700 billion. It's in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So how are we going to finance that gap? Well, you cannot appeal to more people, proselytize. If you like to proselytize, please go ahead, but there's not enough time for that. And you tell them they should give more, sure. But that's how much they're willing to give. So we need another motive. We need something else that will come in, step up, and bridge that gap. So the proposition that I'm going to make to you is perhaps we can appeal to investors to invest in nature. So I'm not going to talk about philanthropy. It already is there. On top of it, could we create a motive for an investment motive in nature? Or another way to look at it, is nature investable? Okay? That's the proposition that I would like to make. Well, let's see. Well, guess what? Well, nature is grabbing carbon. And carbon had a price of 0 for a very long time, started eking up above 0 with the Kyoto protocols, and then it really took off after the Paris Accords. Why? Because the world made a commitment to go carbon 0, carbon negative, carbon neutral by a certain date and time, which was 2050. Now, if the world had made a commitment to go carbon 0 by 2100, I wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be here, because then the price of carbon would be 0. But they made a commitment to go carbon 0 by a certain date and time that's pretty close, and that was predicated on actions to be taken at that point in time. But what happened is, what Greta beautifully said, a lot of blah, blah, blah. The world didn't do anything. They just said, shook hands, hugged each other, if you saw them at the Paris Accord, and they went off to continue to pollute, extract, and kill with impunity. So what happens when you make a commitment towards a date and time moves against you when you don't do anything. So suddenly the need to keep Earth from heating up, avoiding the extra 1.5 degrees, moved up from 2050 to 2040. What did we do? We met, we hugged each other at conferences. Great, we got to save the Earth. And we went on doing nothing. So when you look at the IPCC report, suddenly they're talking about 2030. What that means from a financial economist, I am a professional financial economist, that means there's an urgent demand for carbon reduction, carbon sequestration. So that's where the investment motive starts to come in, right? So does carbon have a value? Yes, and if you were to look at this chart here, it's telling you, started at 0, and at least in Europe, we're trading the carbon among each other at over $100 per ton. So somebody is demanding it. Question is, okay, there's demand. Where will the supply come from? Well, from nature itself. That's what the IPCC report is saying. Nature can provide that supply that would reduce climate change by at least 38% or 40%. So I can use then the pricing of carbon to go back to the science that I just showed you and say, can I use the carbon price to value the carbon services of each of these bodies or these natural assets that I showed you? So here, just for those of you, the ethicists in this room, I am not putting a value on life. Let's all agree that life is priceless, but we continue to kill animals with impunity and each other. So that is on both sides of the equation. What we're really trying to say here is nature beyond its intrinsic value valuable to humanity in a way that matters to us? What matters to us now is fighting climate change. Nature is grabbing carbon. Carbon has a value. So can I now extract what would be, or figure out what would be the value of the service of nature? Right? So let's see. All right, so the elephant. If the elephant could speak, she'll say something like this: why don't you pay me, man? That's it. Why don't you pay me a salary? I've been looking after you. I'm grabbing carbon. Hey, Ralph, you work at the IMF. The IMF pays you a salary. Do they value your intrinsic value? No. They don't know if you're a good father or a lousy husband or whatever it is. They know you're a decent economist, so they give you a salary. So I've been grabbing carbon on your behalf. Why don't you pay me a salary? Okay, to pay her a salary, I need to figure out what is, we start off with her lifetime earnings discounted to the present. And if you were to do that, you get at least $2.6 million is the expected discounted lifetime earnings of an elephant just from carbon sequestration alone. She does a lot of other things. She probably is a wonderful mother, wonderful sister, aunt, and all this stuff. I can't value those. I'm a market economist. I just look at what services are in the market that have a price. I found the carbon price. Hey, okay, so this is just the minimum. Now, if you don't like present value, a lot of people, we're in the finance world, we like to talk about present value. Some of you may like to say, what would be her salary? About $50,000 a year. Okay? What else can we do? Hey, seagrass. Seagrass is that awful grass that when you were at one of these resorts you paid a lot of money for. You walk in and you touch your feet and you go complain, I walked into the water and there's seagrass, and you find them early in the morning chopping at it. Well, that's gold. This is work with Carlos Duarte, the famous Carlos, the father of this work. We have a paper together, basically valuing global seagrass at a minimum of $1 trillion, just in carbon sequestration alone. If we have time, I would get into how we do the valuation, but unfortunately we don't. All right, I'm being told I have less than 2 minutes. All right, so I got to move fast. We can do the same with the whale. We can ask the question, what if the whale could speak? What would you pay the whale in terms of a salary? Yeah, about $70,000 a year. The orphan, this is the open ocean, it belongs to nobody. This is our bequest as a humanity. Think of it that way. $30 trillion just in stock. If you want the flow, once you have the formula for the stock, and the scientists do have that in the IPCC report, you differentiate it, you get the flow equation, and it's another 30 trillion. Okay? So we have a new source of wealth. This is wealth for all of humanity, certainly for those that are sitting on the natural capital. Question is, okay, so Ralph, you tell me the science tells us nature is valuable to us. You, as a financial economist, you can put a price on it. So what do we do with it? Can we go to the markets? And the answer is not yet. You need one more thing, which is who owns the asset? Who can speak on behalf of this asset? People confuse assets and capital, and I hear this all the time. They tell me natural capital. I said, that's economic stock. From a finance point of view, that's a natural asset. For an asset to become capital, you need to codify it in the law. Who owns it? Who can speak on its behalf? Does it have rights of its own? And so all these things, you have to sort it out before you can go to the markets. But let's say you do. Then you are in the world of a new paradigm. Because what we're talking about here is the value of a living nature, not of a dead nature, which is what we've been taught. I, unfortunately, taught my students that too, about the value of extracting from nature. This is a new paradigm that basically talks about the value of a living nature to us. Okay, so we have the science, you have the valuation, you have the legal part, and now you can go off to the markets. But if you want to build markets around nature, you need to worry about a few things. That's what worries me at night, tell you the truth. Can we use nature, markets, to protect, restore natural resources? How do we use all that new source of wealth, not to immiserize people some more, but to actually give back to those people that have been looking after nature forever? These are the indigenous local communities. How do we protect nature itself so it continues? So there's an equity issues, governance issues we need to solve. Okay, how do we protect nature on behalf of future generations? Because maybe you can say you're entitled to one Earth, but as some people have calculated, we are using right now 3 Earths. So basically, we are stealing from our grand and great-grandchildren. And yet, at the same time, we claim that we love our children. We need to think about that. I have 1 minute. So I got to show you. So there's an issue of governance, and here's a plea from me to the rest of the world. We cannot have multiple prices for the same molecule. It's unethical, immoral. We need to solve it if you're really serious about solving the climate issue. You cannot trade carbon in Europe at $100. Then when Africa says, I have the same molecule of carbon, you say, I'll buy it from you for $10. Please. Okay. So, of course, there are governance issues we need to resolve, and I'm going to show you how Rebalance can help you in that respect. All right. So I wanted to show you a real-life situation. This is my work with my other group called Blue-Green Future. With the government of the Bahamas. The Bahamas discovered, the scientists discovered, and this is the article for you, that the Bahamas is sitting on 30% of the global seagrass. Imagine. How much did I value the global seagrass? 1 trillion. This is Nature Journal telling them, you are sitting on 30% of global seagrass. So I come down to the Bahamas and the government says, are we sitting on all that amount of money? Perhaps. So you're sitting on 93,000 square kilometers of seagrass. The additionality, according to, if you believe in REDD+, is about 40,000 square kilometers that you can add, and I valued them for you at least $150 billion in potential. But, and so the Bahamas says, what else do we need to know? The science tells us we have, you tell us we have this much money. What else is there? I said, you need the laws. They said, we passed all these laws. This is all done in the Bahamas, way ahead of everybody else. They've passed the law, who owns it, who can speak on behalf of the carbon, all that stuff. So you have the legal part. What else they said? I said, if you want to get all that money, you need to solve the governance issue. Here's the Rebalance platform that Walid played a key role in this. All right. So if people that want to buy your carbon want to know, I'm buying this carbon, but it's not only about carbon. I want the money to look after the seagrass. I want the money to look after the tiger sharks. I want the money to look after the sea turtles, because you need all of this to have healthy seagrass. And I want my money to go to the local communities. How are you going to assure me that this is happening? Well, there's a blockchain. Our colleagues at Rebalance have designed such a thing where the buyers could be Microsoft, could be household, could be whoever. They purchase the carbon or the biodiversity metric, whatever that thing is. You're not buying the asset, by the way. The asset is retained by the country where the asset is domiciled. And the money through the blockchain, it goes to the right people. And so you, as Microsoft, if you're the one purchasing this, you have some degree of certainty that people are getting the money that they need. And the last thing is, hey, how do I know that you're looking after this asset over time? Because I need to make sure that when I purchase these carbon credits, this over time, we can create what is called a nature trust fund, and that one will ensure that no matter who comes into power, leaves power, politicians can come and go, nature fund is there to look after the asset in perpetuity. And my last slide is, if you were to do all of that, look what happens. The sellers of carbon benefit, these are the governments, they're going to see a revenue. By the way, nature revenue is acyclical. It's not a business cycle, it doesn't follow the business cycle effect. So it's a natural hedge for you. Tourist comes, tourists don't come, COVID, God forbid, another COVID, and tourists disappears. Carbon money keeps coming in, or biodiversity money keeps coming in. So it diversifies the economy, it enhances the fiscal revenue of the government. What does the buyer of the carbon credits get? They get a lot more than carbon. This is not a carbon play at all. This is using carbon as a short game to make people move them from a consumption behavior to an investment behavior. Investing in nature, an investment is a long-term investment. So if I were Google and I bought the carbon credits of the Bahamas, I get to say I have the carbon credits, I enhance my ESG, and because I am producing good things in the ocean, I'm hitting my SDGs, 1, 3, 8, 10, 13, 14, 15, because I'm creating employment, I'm alleviating poverty. These things are incredibly valuable for corporations, especially now. And finally, who wins? Nature wins. And the most important are the people themselves. What we call the IPCLs, these are the indigenous people and the local communities. So as you can see, in what we're talking about, nature-based economy, there are no losers. You have to free yourself from the idea that life is always about the win-lose proposition. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Thank you very much.